I will begin with John, as always. John is the honorary kicker off of events, and then I'll go to the person next door. John, there's a mic coming your way.
Thanks, Rachel. You're too kind. I'm John Coonrod with the Hunger Project, and I was at the IFPRI Resilience Conference in Addis in 2014, and a central message of that conference that was echoed today by Elizabeth and others was that resilience is a community attribute, and the enabling environment has got to strengthen the capacities and creativity at the community level. So this is actually a question for Simeon. In that same year, 2014, the African Union adopted a charter on devolution, decentralization, with very little movement on it. Do you see that Africa should really have a push, and can you put a push on African leaders to really decentralize? I mean, one of the successes of Ethiopia, I think, has been the strong decentralized system and then a strong centralized investment in frontline health and agricultural workers, real investments in community.
Thank you, John. I'm going to move us along simply because
you.
one round, the person right next to you.
Hello, Bhargav from University of Maryland. I have three technical comments, starting with Neil Watskin. Now, the issue of small farmers is important, but it's also driven by unwanted fertility, especially in rural areas in South Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. And actually, we could have a much more evidence-based approach based on some of the surveys that IFPRI has done. For example, the Pakistan Rural Household Panel Survey, it surveys not only the division of farms, but also very specific perceptions of well-being, risks due to flooding, and due to droughts and so on. So that's, I think, more can be said. Similarly, for Claudia Ringler, I just want to make the point that it's important to recharge groundwater. It was done in Indus Valley civilization about 5,000 years ago, but the current government is sort of bent on not actually paying so much attention to the history, but in some cases, especially in Maharashtra, they've succeeded in recharging groundwater, and that's critical also for South Africa as well. And finally, I just wanted to make on Channing Arden's presentation. I mean, it's true that diet quality needs to improve, but we are depleting groundwater by producing a fair amount of dairy and animal products, especially meat. And we have these sort of contradictory publications like the Lancet Commission, which claims that 10 billion people can be fed high quality diets, but there's no evidence. In fact, with the current population of 7.5 billion, we have almost 3 billion people suffering from iron deficiencies, iron deficiency anemia, and Harvest Plus has been very active in this approach. So I think these issues could make the discussion more evidence-based.
Alok, thank you so much. And let me go to the lady at the back.
Hello, I'm Jiyeon Kim, Senior Researcher on Resilience from Mercy Corps. This is an open question, so whoever wants to take it. Reflecting the title of this policy seminar here, which is to reflect the new climate realities and the geographic focus area where conflict is often a contextual factor and often a contributing factor to many of the issues that we discussed here. So I was curious if a presenter could speak to the ways in which conflict dynamics and violent outbreaks could influence or be a major factor for further examination. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to go to Klaus at the back.
Klaus from Great IFPRI. I have a question to the title of the seminar. When you read it, it sounds like we have all time in the world. Where's the word fast?
Oh, okay. We'll come to that one. Thank you so much, Klaus. There was a hand in the middle of the row here. Crystal, if you can just come to the front here. And then I will ask Lucy if there are any online questions after that. Yes, please, to this gentleman.
Yeah, I'm Professor Sarjan from India. So I'd like to have a question to Manish. So regarding, you have any report in the, as far as the animal protein, animal food source concerned? Because one way, we are suggesting the animals are causing the climate changes. So how this is going to combat and all, you have any information on this?
Thank you so much. Lucy, do we have any online questions or comments?
Yes, we have two. The first one's Collins Bujingo from the U.S. What strategies have you put in place to acknowledge the concerns of the smallholder farmers in developing countries, especially in regard to GMOs, which, in my opinion, could be one way to adapt in the era of climate change? And the second one is Ezekiel from Kenya. How best can we promote dryland farming? Thank you.
Okay. Let me take the one last question that I had seen here, panelists, and then I'll come back to you. I think the gentleman right here in the front. Crystal, if you could come. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Marcelo from the George Washington University. I had a question about, I'm a communicator, and usually when I worked for the UNDP in Peru, one of our biggest challenges was how to broaden the message for urban populations, since it's not a reality they see every day. So if you had any ideas or strategies that we could use to broaden the conversation for those people living in urban areas that don't face these challenges.
Thank you. And there's a last online question. Lucy.
This one's from Tom Miles, Chairman at International Biochar Initiative. Conversion of crop and food processing residues to biochar for soil improvement, water quality, and climate resilience has been proven at the practical smallholder level in Africa and South Asia and is supported by thousands of peer-reviewed studies worldwide. How do we scale up the use of this adaptive technique in Africa and South Asia?
Wow, this is a menu of questions and a variety of them. And I will ask our panelists to reflect on the ones they think are most relevant, given the very tight timeline we have of 10 minutes. And I would like to come to Channing last, so that Channing can have the final word as the organizer of this session. And you know what I may do, simply because everybody was so good and disciplined in identifying people to talk with, I'll start with the names that were put on forward, and then I'll ask the remaining colleagues. Simeon, may we begin with you?
Thank you very much, Rajul, and I recorded some 8 questions here, but I'll try to address...
Be very selective.
Yes, 2 of them. And the first one by John, and another one, talking about, maybe 3, I will answer 3, one on the GMOs, another one on scale up the crop residue. So the question was really, how can we, push, if we want African, countries through the African Commission to really scale up the resilience toward the communities and so on. Now, the key point is that the African Union has a program through, they call it the CADE process, which has been quite adopted and reviewed and owned by countries. And they have used that to do their, what they call national agricultural investment plans, most of them. And we have supported it. I think IFPRI was involved in that process for a while. The question is the adoption, the funding of those plans in order to get it done in the respective countries has been, for most cases, problematic for many countries, except for few, like Ethiopia, which has really shown how investment in agriculture can make a difference. There you can actually see the correlation between investment in agriculture and poverty reduction. The case, another case in point is Rwanda, which also cited. So what we are doing at the World Bank, together with the other partners, is to really work together to try to scale up, investment, in the respective countries and align to the CADA process in order to have meaningful impact in their respective countries. And I want to tell you that the leaders are very, very much conscious of that. So when 32 ministers of agriculture in Africa gather together and say, this is what we want, this is how we want to do it, it's a signal. At the annual meeting in October coming, we are going to have another eco event with the ministers of finance, those who have the purse, to see their reaction on that. And they will be telling us how they can scale up the investment in agriculture. So the movement is there, and then the conscience is being really raised about that. On the issue of GMO, when we had the Kigali conference, as I told you, we had like 2 Nobel laureates and eminent scientists. They all really talk about the impact of the need to use GMOs and so on. We all know that there are debates out there, especially from many bodies, NGOs, especially in the Europe part. But for us at the World Bank, what we are actually looking at, we don't have any particular preference. What we want is that the application of science to help African countries to combat hunger and also the impact of climate change on agriculture is the way to go. So whatever science can make a difference, we support it. It's not. There's no. We don't have any particular. We're not against that. And then there was a question on the use of crop residues and for soil, fertility improvement, and the question was how can we scale that up? Yes, in the different projects that we are doing, and we are actually looking for, we will be scaling up technology that are working, that are proven to be excellent, in making the difference on the productivity of farmers, and then we will be scaling them up, in the respective countries. So at this moment, as I'm speaking, we are working on a program, Africa-wide program, on that we call food security and the climate change, and then we'll be, promoting with the countries the technologies that, such as the one that Tom mentioned, that can actually work for the farmers. And we do have isolated good examples through our project that just now closed, which we call like the West Africa Agricultural Productivity Program, where we actually tested, technologies that are proved to be actually working in CGIAR and also in the national system, and then scale them up in the different countries. So wherever we have new ideas and then that can be promoted, we are ready to take them on board.
Thank you so much, Simeon.
Thanks.
Let me move now to Neil, if there's anything you wish to comment or respond, and then I will come to Manish after that. So I give you a heads up, Manish.
Great. Thanks, and thanks for the question. I think the question from the gentleman from University of Maryland around unwanted fertility and population is an important one, especially, and certainly, when you think about agricultural interventions, we can't think of them in a silo, in the sense of, and our foundation certainly also works heavily on family planning, and our co-chair Melinda Gates really emphasizes that. So I think complementary to the agriculture work, thinking about giving women more choices, which in turn can lead to economic empowerment and address some of the issues you talked about. Just two other quick reflections. One, Klaus. We needed to add fast. Just wanted to endorse that suggestion. More, better, new, now, or something like that. Maybe it could be might be getting into chants pretty soon. And then just on the GM question, because from the gentleman from Kenya, I think, like Simeon said, I guess if you think about more, better, and new as a frame, maybe fast, on climate change, there are going to be some things that, like, for example, heat tolerance or drought or other tolerance, that a lot of that you can do through conventional means, but not all of it. And so when you can't do something through conventional means, it would seem that having the full suite of options, whether that's GM or gene editing, will be critical in the toolbox to fight climate change. And I do think, obviously, that is dependent on governments and their interest and willingness to move forward. And we always take our cue from, is there a government that's interested in exploring that kind of technology? But if they are, it feels like that should be part of the toolbox.
Thank you, Neil. May I come to Manish next?
Sure, great. Thank you. Three very quick responses. One on the point about meat or animal. So we have a different report that we took 8 years to write. This is the executive summary, but it talks about an agenda for food to meet the.
Hold the mic closer.
Oh, I'm sorry. The calorie challenge, the land challenge, and the climate challenge. And in that, we talk about 22 different menu options or items that we need to tackle to address all three of these challenges. And one of the areas we realized that has been, until quite recently, under or overlooked is actually looking at the demand side, both around food loss and waste, but also around shifting diets. And so we do have a very 100-page kind of technical paper on what shifting diets actually means. And it doesn't quite go as far as the Lancet report in terms of the assumptions it makes, but I think it gives a good set of assumptions to talk about what that shift may look like. Just two very, on the communications question, this was fascinating. So in this report, this adaptation report, we had a technical team that was trying to come up with what is the narrative around adaptation that we had to say. And then I actually hired a communications team, an outside communications team, to talk about, they did a lot of interviews with people that were not in the climate community about how do we talk about adaptation or climate to people that already don't believe that this is a huge problem. And the technical team started off, the narrative must begin with, the sky is falling, climate crisis, 3 degrees, what that means, impacts on yields, impacts on livelihoods. The communications team said you have to start with human resourcefulness, ingenuity, that people have the ability, creativity, innovation to find solutions to these problems. But it was a fascinating conversation we had about how to construct a narrative that actually spoke to people that we don't typically reach. So just a hugely important question. And just one last point on the urgency issue, absolutely, right? Greenhouse gas emissions last year increased 2-3%. We are at 40 gigatons here at 2020. Every 10 years, they have to be cut in half. 2030 by 20. 2040, 10 gigatons. 2050, 5 gigatons. And that's still not getting us to a 1.5 degree pathway. So the urgency to find ways to both mitigate and adapt cannot be more forcefully stressed. So thank you for making that point.
So now, forgive me, participants and panelists, because of the time limitations, I'm going to encourage interaction with the rapid-fire presenters following this, and I will give Channing the final word. To close us down, final messages, reflections. Channing, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I was just going to go into a couple of the questions for Klaus on FAST. I have your email, and I will use it the next time I need a title. That's my response there. I think that Simeon pointed out some things that we were missing. The education and skills piece, we don't disagree. We're missing the nutrition piece, right? We didn't really talk about nutrition, the way that diets need to change, and so forth, and all of that's there. That's the limitation of 30 minutes, and perhaps the focus on calories. Let's see if there was another question that I thought I would get to. Yes, I think on the point on strategies for GMOs and technology is also an important one, and not just because of GMOs, but also because of gene editing. And what I think we definitely don't want to see is GMO regulation over constraining gene editing, specifically if gene editing is purely substituting for just natural breeding processes. In other words, if gene editing can simply speed up what would be a natural breeding process, then it's very difficult to see why this would be put off of the table in terms of when we're facing problems like this. So I thank you all for coming. I hope this was edifying. It was really useful for us. I'm very grateful to Manish actually over the whole year. We've had a number of really good meetings, and he has carried forward a lot of work. We've had a very good partnership with the Gates Foundation. We're really looking forward to keeping that going, and it's been nice to get to know Neil in this process. And then, as Simeon says, he's an old friend. And I'm very pleased to be sitting next to him. So thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Thank you very much, everyone.